Hello everyone, my name is Joe and welcome to the Timmsoski podcast, the first podcast of mine. You may know me from YouTube by the name of Timmsoski, funnily enough. However, if not, I do cycling and pro cycling manager videos over there. Now, quickly, starting a podcast is something I've wanted to do for an exceptionally long time. So I decided with the Tour de France coming up just around the corner, there is no time like the present. Now, this podcast is going to focus on cycling, and of course, over the next few weeks, that will be pretty much solely around the Tour de France. However, with so many races bunched together due to the condensed season, there's going to be plenty of races to discuss coming up as well, which I cannot wait for. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. Let's jump into my Tour de France preview. Okay, so as I planned this podcast in advance, I decided that the best way to go about things would be to go through team by team. So that's the plan. We're going to kind of focus on the main GC teams and also take a look at some of kind of the lesser known teams as well at the race. But we'll start with the big GC favourites, I think. With that in mind, where else to start other than Team Jumbo-Visma? And of course, they've been the pretenders really to Team Ineos in recent times somewhat. However, Primož Roglič has shown supreme form this year, that has to be said. And their main aim for the race is, of course, the coveted yellow jersey. As I just mentioned, Primož Roglič has been completely dominant in 2020. He looked so good at the Dauphiné last week before, of course, stage 4. He'd won a stage, he was in the leader's jersey, and he fell on stage 4. It was a bit of a hard fall. I think his teammate Van Aert said that he might have been suffering from concussion type symptoms. So he got to the end of that stage. He protected his GC lead. However, he did not start ahead of stage 5. And at the time, everyone kind of thought this was a precautionary move by Jumbo-Visma. However, since the incident, Roglič himself has come out on Instagram in a kind of odd manner, to be honest, and said he's not really recovering to the extent he thought he would have done by now. So that is interesting to me, to say the least. Is that mind games? Is that Roglič trying to take the pressure off himself if he's unable to perform to the level we're now expecting of him at this Tour de France? But has to be said, Roglič probably still remains the favourite in most people's eyes ahead of this tour. Interesting to see how he's going to start this race. Outside of Roglič, we have to mention Tom Dumoulin. He didn't race for over a year, well over a year. I think he last raced at the 2019 Giro d'Italia before returning post-lockdown. And he's been slowly ramping things up. And at the Dauphiné, he started off in kind of the lower tier of GC riders. He was supporting Roglič early on. However, at stage 5, he really did kind of come through, improve on his earlier performances, and it has to be said, Tom Dumoulin does seem to be ramping up his level of fitness and form almost perfectly in sync with the Tour de France. So I think if not Roglič, Dumoulin is certainly a realistic card to play for Jumbo-Visma. We have to mention, of course, Steven Kruijswijk, who did finish on the podium of the Tour last year. He will not be there this year after that fall, I think on stage 3 of the Dauphiné. He fell on the downhill and he will not make it to the start line. And that is taking away massively from the Jumbo-Visma squad. I don't think he was going to be one of their leaders at the race. I think he was going to really be in a super domestique role. With that in mind though, they still have an absolutely elite squad, perhaps the best squad at the race. Sepp Kuss, who won stage 5 of the Dauphiné. They have George Bennett as well, who of course came second to Fuglsang at Il Lombardia this year. He kind of broke off from the rest of the Tour de France team and went for a few one-day classics in Italy. So Sepp Kuss and George Bennett have been riding absolutely brilliantly as of late. I'm not sure they're really GC cars that they can play. There's been a lot of talk of Kuss after winning stage 5 at the Dauphiné, but I really think these guys are going to be on domestique duty for the race. And that's fair enough when you have Dumoulin and Roglič in the ranks as well. Other than that, the only man we need to mention, of course, is Wout van Aert, who has been the best rider post-lockdown, I think it's fair to say. Winning Strada Bianca, winning Milano San Remo as well. He's proving he can climb as well at the Dauphiné. He won stage 1 of the Dauphiné. He cannot stop winning. He can sprint as well. He can clearly get over climbs as I just mentioned. And the team have said that Van Aert is going to be purely a domestique at the race. To be honest, I'm finding that hard to believe to some extent. I can understand it. They have the likes of Tony Martin, Grondal Janssen as well in the team to control things. But if Van Aert was let off his leash, I am almost certain he could challenge for the green jersey. In fact, he'd probably be my favourite for the green jersey, which we'll come to more later. Van Aert, I'm sure, can win a stage at this tour, at least a stage, despite acting as a domestique as well for Roglic. It's going to be intriguing, that's for sure, how much Van Aert is allowed to ride for himself. But primarily, as the team have said so far, he will be a domestique. So Jumbo-Visma are going to be clearly of key presence at this year's race. However, moving on, the Ineos Grenadiers, as they are now called, moving on from Team Ineos. And the big talking point has to be the exclusion of Froome and Geraint Thomas from their team selection. I mean, we did expect Froome to some extent. Of course, he had that horrendous crash at the Dauphiné last year, but Geraint Thomas, I don't think many people saw that coming at all, particularly Geraint himself announcing his intentions to lead the Giro team and miss the tour completely. And he did look a bit shell-shocked, I'll be honest, in that video. But yeah, massive surprise to me. Although saying that, Dave Brailsford, it's clear really that he says no rider is bigger than the team above all else. And if Froome and Geraint Thomas aren't in the form they need to be, then they're not in the team. It's as simple as that, despite, of course, the 5 Tour de France they have between them. However, no Froome, no Thomas. Egan Bernal is their main leader at the race, of course, the defending champion. And there are big question marks over Egan Bernal. Is he of the form required to defend that jersey? Because Roglic did somewhat outclass Bernal in the build-up to the race, and Bernal was there or thereabouts at the beginning of the Dauphiné, but did seem to fade slowly as the race went on, and clearly wasn't as strong as not only Roglic, but many other of the GC contenders. He pulled out of the Dauphiné early, like Primož Roglic, so really is an intriguing battle between these two contenders. Bernal put withdrawing from the Dauphiné down to back pain, I think, but I'm not sure if that's a ploy by the team, again, to take the pressure off Egan Bernal, because we all expected him just to be absolutely dominant again post-lockdown. So big question marks for me over Bernal's form, and this year it's going to be crucial to be in form from the get-go at the Tour, because we have the Col de Torini, we have some big climbs on stage 2 of the race, climbing throughout the first week, which really goes against what we're used to at the Tour de France. So Bernal and the rest of these guys who aren't quite ready, as far as we can see, are going to have to be, because the guys who are feeling good are going to have to try and take advantage of that early on in the race. Other than Bernal though, of course, Ineos have drafted in Richard Carapaz, who is the defending Giro d'Italia champion, winning that with Movistar last season. He was riding in Italy and he was kind of set in all our minds to defend the Giro d'Italia. However, he has been brought over to the Tour de France team. He won a stage of the Tour of Poland. However, he did take a fall in that race and he didn't quite look the same after that. He didn't do well at the Il Lombardia. When you think about the start list there, fairly weak with many riders over at the Dauphiné. Personally, I expected Carapaz to perform a bit better there. It's a different type of race, of course, that one-day race compared to the Tour, but still, I have question marks over Carapaz's form, which to me makes the exclusion of Geraint Thomas that bit more surprising. Carapaz isn't the only main helper of Bernal though. Of course, we have Pavel Sivakov, who has been riding just fantastically post-lockdown. He's looked in maybe the best form of any of the Ineos riders, and I really hope that Ineos really can keep him in the GC hunt after the first week and week 2, if he's there or thereabouts and doesn't completely scupper his chances riding full Bernal. I think Sivakov has a chance at a fantastic result at this Tour de France. I really hope, like I say, they don't use him as a pure domestique and keep him as a kind of secondary option. If we remember back to the Giro last year, that's almost how Carapaz did win the Giro. Everyone was looking at Landa for Movistar. He was kind of the main leader, or at least a joint leader alongside Richard Carapaz. Carapaz attacked up the roads and no one followed. Landa wasn't going to chase his teammate down. And that's how Carapaz won that race, really. So if Sivakov can keep himself in a similar situation to Carapaz at the Giro last year, I truly believe Sivakov could be a player in the GC. So Jumbo-Visma and the Ineos Grenadiers chasing the yellow jersey, that is basically their only goal at the race. However, we do have a big home French hope at the race, and that lies with Thibaut Pinot. He won on the Tourmalet at last year's Tour de France in fine fashion, attacking away at the end, sprinting ahead of the likes of Buchmann, Kruijswijk, Geraint Thomas and Egan Bernal. He did fantastically on that climb, and really, he did look like the best climber at that race. It's hard to say whether he is still the best climber at the Tour de France. It's hard to say how he would have done in those final few mountain stages at last year's Tour, because as we know too well, he had to withdraw from the race whilst chasing that yellow jersey. And those were some heartbreaking scenes, seeing him, I think, alongside William Bonnet, who again is at this year's race in support of Thibaut Pinot. But yeah, can Pinot put it together over 3 weeks? We haven't seen him do it yet in a full Grand Tour. Even at the Giro, he struggled with illness in the 3rd week, and that has always been his issue. But when it comes down to pure climbing talent, Pinot has to be considered with the best of them. And the course obviously suits him this year. There's no long flat time trials. Of course, we have the time trial on stage 20 that finishes up La Planche de Belleville. So that time trial really does suit Thibaut Pinot compared to a standard flatter time trial. So the route suits him. Can he put it together over 3 weeks? The question remains to be seen. And when we look at his squad, we have David Gaudu, who hasn't ridden too well post-lockdown. We'll see what kind of form he is in when the race gets underway. We have Reichenbach here, who has looked good in support of Pinot at the Dauphiné. Stefan Kung, who is so crucial to that FDJ team, in my opinion, because really they're made up of pure climbers alongside Stefan Kung, who is so good, of course, in the time trial and the kind of flatter terrain. So he can be crucial really to prevent something like the crosswind stage taking place last year, where Pinot lost masses of time on a flatter stage, and you can't afford to do that if you want to win the Tour. And you have to also consider the exclusion of Arnaud Démare, and that is a big decision by FDJ. They clearly are in full belief that Pinot can win this Tour de France, because Démare, the form he's in, he's been in fantastic form, of course recently just missing out on the European Championship behind Giacomo Nitsolo. We'll talk about him a bit more later, but Démare, the form he's in, you have to think he'd have won at least 1 or 2 stages at this Tour. So it's a big decision to drop him from the lineup and fully support Pinot. So next up, I want to discuss the German outfit, Bora Hansgrohe, and interestingly, they're the first team that I've mentioned so far with ambitions other than the yellow jersey. Peter Sagan is here. He'll be going for green. He is the big favourite on paper for the green jersey. I think it will be his 8th green jersey if he wins it this year. They have the likes of Daniel Oss, Lukas Postelberger as well to help him out. Other than that though, they do have 4th place from the 2019 Tour, Emmanuel Buchmann, and Buchmann, really for me, is criminally underrated. I am sure if this man is in the fitness he needs to be, he can really challenge for that yellow jersey. He had a good Tour de France last year, and he looked good at the Dauphiné prior to his fall. And that is the crucial talking point when it comes to Emmanuel Buchmann. That fall, he fell at the same point as Kruijswijk as well, I think on stage 3. He withdrew from the race in that moment. He's going to give it a go from the start, but he, like Roglic has said, he's really not feeling as good as he would hope to by now. It's going to be a difficult first week at the Tour, that's for sure. These guys, Buchmann, Roglic, everyone else who's been struggling with injury, Bernal as well, I guess, they really need to be ready if they don't want to lose time in these first few stages, or the first 6 or 7 stages overall. Hopefully Buchmann can ride himself into the race and pick up that form he showed pre-fall, because as I've just mentioned, Buchmann, in my opinion, is a real danger in the GC. He's been perhaps criticised before for not attacking enough, for not riding aggressively enough. I personally think that's unfair. He doesn't have the acceleration and the punchiness of the likes of Thibaut Pinot. However, he does go for long-range attacks occasionally. For example, the Mallorca Challenges. He's won them, I think, 2 years in a row with long-range solo attacks. Also, I think it's Zulia Basque Country Tour last year. He really did put in a long-range attack there and won solo. So he's certainly got a long-range attack in him. He just doesn't quite have that punch that a typical climber may have, but Bookman, watch out for him. So other than Bookman, we have Maxi Shackman, who miraculously, I was pleasantly surprised to see Maxi Shackman on the start list of the race, because he did have that crash at El Lombardia, that absolutely bizarre, terrible crash really, with a driver coming on the course in the final kilometers. He crashed into the back of the car, and I think he broke his collarbone. Somehow he is recovering in time to start the tour. I think, like Bookman, he said he's going to give it a go. They want to give him a go. The team want to let him try it out rather than replace him and really risk him having to drop out early, because we all know Max Shackman, he can win on plenty of terrains. He's quick in a reduced sprint as well. Very, very punchy rider when at his best. So hopefully Shackman, like Bookman, can ride into the race. Other than that, Bora Hansgrohe do have a young Leonard Kemner who did win a stage at the Dauphiné. Almost their Sepp Kuss, very similar riders. I think Kemner's a few years younger. And Kemner really is a future Grand Tour contender, in my opinion. He is so talented. He can TT a little bit. He can clearly climb as well. I think he's almost a wild card, you could call him, on this Bora Hansgrohe team. He's definitely a rider to watch at this tour. Next up then, I want to talk about the Koenig Quickstep, and they are led by the flamboyant man himself, the flamboyant Frenchman Julien Alaphilippe, who was in yellow right up until stage 19, that neutralised stage of last year's tour. And what a performance that was. No one saw him holding on to yellow. In the end, he did crack on the final couple of stages and did lose yellow. But what a tour he had last year. What a 2019 he had as a whole, winning the likes of Milan San Remo as well. This year, I'm not quite sure if I've seen that same form from Alaphilippe. However, you can never rule him out in the overall GC. The parcours do suit him. Lots of climbing, lots of hills, difficult parcours really does suit Alaphilippe in my opinion. And I can really see him going for yellow after stage 2. We have the first stage, Nice to Nice, which most likely will be a mass sprint. I think the sprinters teams will go for it. There is quite a bit of climbing, so some of the really heavier sprinters could perhaps get dropped, but I think the likes of Caleb Ewan, Giacomo Nitsolo will be there to challenge for that one, alongside Quickstep Sam Bennett as well. However, stage 2, they have the Col de Torini. I think we have the Col de la Colmiane as well, with some shorter climbs to the end of the stage. It's a massive stage to have on stage 2 of the tour. I can really see Alaphilippe going for that yellow jersey on that stage, almost similarly to what he did at the 2019 Tour de France, where he attacked away. I think he caught Thomas de Gent with Pinot attacking alongside him. Similar fashion to that, I can see Alaphilippe going for a similar attack, stage 2 of the tour, going for the yellow jersey. Whether he can hold on and win the yellow jersey overall, I'm not too sure, but wouldn't discount him. Apart from Alaphilippe though, Quickstep have an exceptionally strong squad as always. I just mentioned Bennett, who is one of the best sprinters at the race, definitely a top 5 sprinter in the world. He'll be looking for at least a stage win, I can imagine. Other than that though, Zdeněk Stybar has been replaced. I think it's a knee injury that's going to keep him out of competing at this year's tour. He's been replaced by Remy Cavagna, and if I had to compare Remy to a current rider in the peloton, it would have to be Thomas de Gent, because to me, Remy Cavagna does seem like the new king of the breakaway. Thomas de Gent still holds that throne, that's for sure, but Remy Cavagna certainly is a challenger, a pretender, if you like, to de Gent's breakaway king throne. So yeah, watch out for Cavagna in the breaks, alongside the likes of Casper Asgreen. He won a stage at the Vuelta last year from a breakaway, if I'm not mistaken. We have Bob Jungels as well. He's leaving the team for AG2R next year, but those 3 guys really are capable of winning stages by themselves in the breakaway. Next up then, I want to talk about UAE Team Emirates, and led by Tadej Pogačar, still just 21 years old. He already has a Grand Tour podium to his name. Amazingly, he is a genuine contender for this tour, and unlike many of the other contenders I've already discussed, and some of the ones I'm about to discuss as well, Pogačar really comes into this race with no real outstanding issues. He hasn't had any injury issues. He didn't ride fantastically to start the Dauphiné, but he really came into the race in the final couple of stages. He was third on stage 5 after attacking away with about 20k to go, alongside a couple of other riders. But Pogačar really ramping up his form, it seems, if the Dauphiné is anything to go by. He is definitely a genuine contender at this race. Only thing I would say about him is he does seem to like the steeper climbs, the climbs you see regularly at the Vuelta, where he performs so well. I'm unsure of his ability over massive 20k plus climbs that perhaps aren't quite so steep. We'll see. But Pogačar, don't see him winning this race. I definitely see a top 5 on the cards though. UAE also bring the likes of Fabio Aru, of course, a previous Grand Tour winner. Can't really see him doing anything else other than riding for Pogačar. They have De La Cruz, who's ridden pretty well recently. They also have Alex Kristoff, who I'm not sure if he is quick enough to win stages. There are limited sprint stages at this Tour de France. It'll be interesting to see what Kristoff's form is like. He hasn't shown too much post-lockdown. We also have Davide Formula, who rode so impressively at the Dauphiné, winning stage 3 from the breakaway. He looked absolutely brilliant there, really outclassing the rest of that breakaway, which featured the likes of Pierre Latour. So Davide Formula, no slouch whatsoever. I can see him really challenging for stage wins at this tour. Won't be a contender for the GC though, in my opinion. Alrighty, we're going to move on then to Archaea Samsic, and I'm going to talk about them alongside Bahrain Mclaren as well as Astana, because I can really group these teams together, led by Nairo Quintana, Mikel Landa, and Superman Lopez, Miguel Angel Lopez for Astana, who is riding his first Tour de France actually, and he is bidding to be the first rider since Laurent Fignon in 1983 to win as a debutant at the Tour de France. That'll be very interesting to see if he's capable of doing that. But Nairo Man started the year so well for Archaea Samsic, almost looked unstoppable. I remember him winning, I think, up Mont Ventoux. They didn't go quite to the top. It was up to Chalet Reynard. He won by over a minute and a half, I think. 90 seconds, the gap to second place. And there was the likes of Sepp Kuss, Thibaut Pinot in that field. So Quintana started off the season looking unbeatable. Since then, he did have that crash in Colombia, and that does seem to have hampered his form somewhat, despite not suffering any major injuries. I think he has a minor issue with his knee. That is a development from that crash. Hopefully, we can see early season form Nairo Man at this race. It would be fantastic, I think, for Nairo and for just the Tour de France in general to see Nairo Quintana as a genuine contender at this race. However, I would suggest that Archaea Samsic's team doesn't really have the strength to fully support Nairo Man, certainly compared to the likes of Ineos, Jumbo-Visma, even FDJ. We have Romain Barguil here, who isn't a Grand Tour contender. He could definitely challenge for some stage wins, maybe the Polkadot Jersey, which he's won previously, if I'm not mistaken. Apart from that, we have the likes of winner Anacona, Diego Rosa, Daya Quintana, Nairo Man's brother. But these guys, I can't really see them supporting Nairo Man as much as some of the other favourites. So Bahrain Mclaren, and this is the first time I remember Mikel Landa being given a sole leadership role at a Grand Tour. Of course, he rode for Team Sky. He then went on to Movistar, where he's always kind of had a joint leadership role. I did think, go into the Giro last year as the team leader, but of course, as we know too well now, Carapaz, his teammate, did go on to win that race. Things could have been different for Landa, I'm sure. On many occasions, he has shown fantastic form at many a Grand Tour, even since his Astana days, where he was teammates with Aru, when Aru did win the Giro d'Italia back then. So, Mikel Landa, will he be free at this year's tour? I'm sure he will be. That is one thing he will be. He will be free at this tour. And he does have a strong team around him as well. We have the likes of Wout Poels, we have Peo Bilbao, Damiano Caruso, all very, very capable helpers in the mountains. These guys probably will be going for stage wins as well, alongside helping Michael Landa. We have the likes of Rafa Vals as well. So Michael Landa has a strong team around him, I'm certain of that. However, he did have issues towards the end of the Dauphiné. I think he did finish the race, but he was dropped massively on the final stage. I think he was suffering from cramps, I remember. So can he find the form? If he can, Michael Landa is a real contender at this Tour de France, perhaps going somewhat under the radar in my opinion. He can ride a 3-week race, that is for sure. He performed well on the final mountain stage at last year's Tour, at last year's Giro as well. So he rode 2 Grand Tours in succession, and he was there in the 3rd week on both occasions. He can ride for 3 weeks, I have no doubts about that. Can he keep himself in the picture going into that 3rd week? That is the crucial talking point for me. If Landa is able to keep himself within a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes of the race leads going into the 3rd week, watch out, because Landa will be after that yellow jersey. So I've already mentioned him, but Miguel Angel Lopez, or Superman as he is well known in his homeland Colombia and also outside that region now as well. But Lopez, riding his first Tour de France, we know he is capable of challenging for Grand Tours, at least top 10ing, top 5 Grand Tours, at least at the Giro and the Vuelta. He's done that on plenty of occasions already. He's still just 26, but coming now into his prime, really, stereotypically towards his latter 20s and early 30s. Lopez really, I think, needs to push on, because I haven't really seen him do that in the past year or two. He's kind of stagnated as a top 5 Grand Tour rider, but not someone you'd expect to really go on and win that Grand Tour, especially at the Tour de France, where the competition is that little bit more compared to the Giro and the Vuelta. It's going to be intriguing to see just how Lopez can perform against the very, very best top teams, because Ineos and Jumbo-Visma, they don't take the same squads they do, or the same level of squads they do to the Giro and the Vuelta that they do to the Tour. So cannot wait to see Lopez against the very best. One thing I would say about Lopez is, similarly to Pogačar, he is another one that really comes into the Tour this year without any clear outstanding issues, either with his form or his kind of fitness in general with regards to injuries. He didn't perform too well at the Dauphiné until that stage 5, where he did show real signs of life. He was dropped on a couple of occasions, just a little bit in the earlier stages, and didn't show his same explosive nature that we're so used to with him on some of the bigger climbs. If he can really build on that form from the Dauphiné, he can definitely be a top 5 in the GC at this year's Tour. Can he win it? I'm unsure myself, but I definitely see him being there or thereabouts. And similarly to Landa, Lopez has a very strong team built around him, with the likes of Alexei Lutsenko, Jon and Gorka Izagirre, the latter performing very well this year so far. I think he won a race in Italy in the build-up to Il Lombardia there. We have new Spanish national road race champion. Cannot believe Luis Leon Sanchez hasn't won that race before. He finally becomes the Spanish road race champion. And also another rider I would like to mention is Harold Tejada. This man is just 23 years old, riding his first Grand Tour, and he really is a super mountain domestique. He rode well alongside Lopez at the Volta Algarve earlier this year. That was pre-lockdown. However, he's been riding in Italy alongside Vlasov and Fuglsang post-lockdown, and he really has shown his abilities to really be a super domestique on the climbs over there. Watch out for Tejada at this race, because he honestly could be one of Lopez's best helpers, despite there being Sanchez, the Izagirre brothers, and Lutsenko in the squad. I'm going to move on then to an American outfit in the form of EF Pro Cycling, as they are now known. And they really come in with a versatile and intriguing team in general, it must be said, because we have Rigoberto Urán to start with. And he's of course come second at the Tour de France previously in 2017. To me, he doesn't look like he has the form currently to win the race. He didn't perform too well at the Dauphiné. However, if we're going to talk about the Dauphiné with this team, we cannot go without mentioning Daniel Felipe Martinez, the winner of the 2020 Dauphiné just a week prior to the Tour de France, or just over a week prior to the race. He won the GC there after Roglic dropped out. He took advantage, came second on stage 5. Pinot couldn't react, and Dan Martinez did go on to win that race. By far the biggest results of his young career so far in Europe, that is for sure, or in general. He's shown real signs that he could really develop into a genuine Grand Tour contender. However, before the Dauphiné, he hasn't really shown that form in Europe and in the World Tour. Now, we know he can do it in the World Tour against the very best. Can he do it over 3 weeks? It's a long shot, of course. We know that, but Martinez, he rode a clever race as well at the Dauphiné. He rode tactically very astutely. He never overexerted his efforts, and he attacked at the perfect time to take the win. So Martinez, it's going to be intriguing to see how he does compared to Rigoberto Urán, who is the real leader. Are they going to act as joint leaders? However, if we're considering leaders at EF, I think we have to mention Sergio Higuita as well, because the fellow young Colombian, he was the winner of the Tour of Colombia earlier this year, ahead of teammate Dan Martinez. I'm not sure Higuita is a GT leader, but this man is quick. He can sprint for a climber. Really a classic Valverde mold, in my opinion, because I don't really see him competing for Grand Tours, but he can get over big climbs and he can sprint very, very quickly as well. So Higuita potentially maybe a challenger for the KOM jersey, the Polkadot jersey, and some stage wins as well. I don't think he'll be leading EF in the GC if they do go for GC. Dan Martinez and Rigoberto Urán, I see sharing that role really. Okay, so really I think I've gone through all of the main GC favourites. If I haven't by now mentioned the winner of the 2020 Tour de France, I will be shocked, but we're going to go through some of the other teams, take a look at their squads, and look at their main goals ahead of the race. I'm going to start this kind of part 2 of the podcast with Trek Segafredo, and they have Bauke Mollema, they have Richie Porte, and those two riders really, I think the team have said, are going to share the GC leadership. Do I really see them challenging for the yellow jersey? Not really. I'd love to say I do, but really I think a top 10 is a realistic goal for Mollema or Porte, who really is now into his mid-30s. He's had such a lack of luck as well at the Tour de France, has Richie. Hopefully, if nothing else, he can get past stage 9 like he did last year and get a top 10. Maybe best if one of these riders, though, goes for stage wins whilst the other really tries to focus on the GC. However, Trek do have some very, very strong riders outside that GC battle. We have Jasper Stuyven, we have world champion Mads Pedersen, we have Edvard Toons as well. And that trio of riders really are kind of the Flandrian mould. They're very good on long, difficult, perhaps some short hills as well, but long and difficult stages really are their cup of tea. They can all sprint very capably, not really in the elite sprinter category, but they can definitely get top 10s in mass sprints and challenge for reduced bunch sprints. I know Mads Pedersen did win a sprint at the Tour of Poland, but I can't really see him doing that against the likes of Ewan and Bennett. Really without a pure sprinter at the race, or at least an elite sprinter, I'm interested to see how they really approach the Stuyven, Pedersen and Edvard Toons kind of trio. They can all sprint very equally, in my opinion. So will they maybe rotate things and have Stuyven sprint for the stage one day and then Mads Pedersen the next, and then Edvard Toons gets the next opportunity? I'm not sure. We'll see on that. I think Stuyven probably the slightly better sprinter of the three. We'll see how they play things. I'll move on then to Lotto Suzao, and this team really are purely focused on winning stages. I think that's their only focus at the race. Maybe they'll go for the KOM jersey and of course the green jersey because they have Caleb Ewan. But really, I think they'll be happy with a couple of stage wins or as many stage wins as possible. They don't really have a GC contender. They are led by Caleb Ewan in the sprints, probably the best sprinter at the race. He won the most stages in the sprints at last year's tour. That'll be his aim again this time around, I am sure of that. And really, I think Sam Bennett is the only real sprinter currently close or on Caleb Ewan's level. We have Peter Sagan, we have Van Aert, Nitsolo as well, who I will talk about very shortly. But I think Caleb Ewan will be disappointed without 1 or 2 stage wins at a minimum this year. So other names in that Lotto Suzao team: Thomas de Gent, Phil Gilbert, John Dane Kolb as well. These guys are capable of winning stages on many, many different terrains. Thomas de Gent, we know, I mentioned him earlier when I spoke about Cavagna. He is the breakaway king in the peloton. If you let him up the roads, you're basically letting the stage go, because it's highly unlikely that he will be brought in. Phil Gilbert as well, very, very capable from a breakaway situation, still into his latter 30s now. Dane Kolb as well, he's in his 30s. He's not quite the sprinting force he was. He'll probably be the lead out man alongside Roger Kluger for Caleb Ewan. But Dane Kolb as well, I can see hunting stage wins. Another rider who would be in this list is Tim Wellens. Sadly, he won't be able to race this year due to an injury. He has been replaced by Frederick Frison. Next up, I'm going to talk about Mitchelton Scott and AG2R Le Mondial, because I can really see big similarities in their team selection. We have Adam Yates and Romain Bardet. I think both of these riders have already stated they're not going for the GC. They're only going for stage wins, which almost definitely means they'll almost accidentally go for the KOM jersey as well, just in the fact that they're going breakaways, going for those stages. So I think Adam Yates and Bardet, we can really cross them off the GC contender list and put them to the top of that Polkadot Jersey favourites list. And they'll both be looking for stage wins. Looking further then at Mitchelton Scott's team, we have Esteban Chavez, Mikel Nieve, and interesting stat I saw on Nieve. He has now started 18 Grand Tours. This will be his 19th Grand Tour of his career. He has not only finished all of them, but he's finished in the top 25 of all of them as well, with his best finish being 8th at the 2015 Vuelta. So Nieve is dead set to get another top 25. I think that's pretty much a guarantee. So he will maybe be helping out Yates, maybe going for stages himself. Same for Esteban Chavez. He has shown signs of life, of returning to that 2016, 2017 form that he almost won the Giro with. He won Il Lombardia with as well, Esteban Chavez. I don't think he's in GC contending form just yet, at least. I think the other two names worth mentioning for Mitchelton Scott are Daryl Impey and Luka Mezgec. Both of the sprinter builds, I think they'll really be looking for chances in reduced bunch sprints. Can't really see them challenging Caleb Ewan or Sam Bennett. Even the likes of Sagan and Van Aert, I think they're not quite that level of sprint speeds, but they can both certainly challenge in slightly reduced sprints, and they're both pretty good climbers as well. So they can get over some of the more hilly, more mountainous stages that some of the sprinters will struggle on. AG2R have some more stage hunters then, with the likes of Benoit Cosnefroy. And when I think of Cosnefroy, I really think of Alaphilippe Light. He's younger than Alaphilippe, but he really is a very similar build to Alaphilippe. Very, very punchy, very good acceleration. He's very attacking style as well. Likes to attack on the shorter hills. Can't really get over the big mountains, but he will be looking for stage wins. I've already mentioned Alaphilippe. I can see him going for stage 2 and yellow in stage 2. We could well see Cosnefroy trying to do exactly the same if he's able to get over Col de Torini. We also have Ollie Narsen here. We know what this man can do, a Flandrian. He can sprint as well, get over the shorter hills. He could definitely be challenging for stage wins. Same with, I think, Clement Venturini. He's a pretty quick finisher. And I think AG2R will really be pushing the tempo on stage 1, because we do have some climbing on stage 1, trying to drop the likes of Caleb Ewan, Sam Bennett, even Peter Sagan if he's struggling. So the likes of Clement Venturini can challenge for the stage, getting rid of some of those really, really fast pure sprinters. Okay, we're going to move on then to Team NTT, who coming into the race don't have a GC contender. They have Pozzo Vivo as probably their best pure climber, maybe Kreuziger you could say over Pozzo at this stage in his career. But I think Team NTT really should focus on the new, not only Italian champion, but European champion as well, Giacomo Nitsolo. He has shown fantastic form, both pre-lockdown and post-lockdown clearly, and he has been in great form, almost the best form of his life. He's never won a stage at a Grand Tour. We know he had, I think it was the final stage at the Giro a couple of years ago, taken away from him. He won the stage, and then he was disqualified, I think, for changing lanes in the final sprint. Heartbreaking for Giacomo. I know he didn't agree with that decision at the time. It'd be great to see him at least get a stage win, and I can really see him competing for stage 1 at this year's race. And not only that, he could really challenge for the green jersey because he is probably a bit better than the likes of Ewan and Sam Bennett at getting over the larger climbs and some of the shorter hills as well. So he could really see more opportunities to win stages. So yeah, guys, write it down. Nitsolo is a big challenger in my eyes for that green jersey. Okay, so Team Sunweb up next. And when I look at their team, I'm thinking of a rider I don't see on their team selection. And of course, belaying Michael Matthews. He won a race recently. I think it's called the Britannia Classic now. With utter ease, he outsprinted, I think, Luka Mezgec in the final, the likes of Quinn Simmons as well, who you would expect him to beat, that is for sure. But he is in clearly good form. He did well at Milan-San Remo as well. And personally, I just do not see how Michael Matthews isn't in the Team Sunweb Tour de France team, because he could be a genuine challenger for that green jersey. He could definitely challenge for stage wins, considering there aren't so many of the elite pure sprinters at this year's race. We don't have Ackermann, we don't have De Maar, no Groenewegen, of course, as well as Jakobsen, sadly. So the opportunities would really be there for Michael Matthews, and I just don't understand. If you guys know why he hasn't been selected, let me know, because personally, I just do not know why. However, putting that aside, we do have T.S. Benoot, we have Soren Kragh Andersen, who I think came third at Omloop earlier in the year. We also have the young Swiss, Mark Hirschi, and those three riders really, for me, are super strong. They're not GC contenders. Perhaps Benoot might try a GC, maybe try and scrape a top 10, but he won't be a genuine GC yellow jersey contender at least. But Benoot, Hirschi, Kragh Andersen, those three riders, super strong in my opinion. And we could definitely see any of those guys win a stage or two. So let's talk about Movistar, because we're so used to seeing Movistar and hearing them talked about as some of the GC contenders with the likes of Quintana, Valverde, Landa more recently, Carapaz as well. They've always been really one of the main challengers to Sky and Ineos at the Grand Tours, but their squad's decimated from last season. Quintana has gone, Landa has gone, Carapaz has gone. They're left with a 40-year-old Alejandro Valverde, who I'm not sure what to expect from at this year's Tour. He's really been slow to get back up and running really post-lockdown. Can he challenge for the GC? Maybe a top 10 could be on the cards. Can't really see more than that though. They have Emrick Mass, who has a podium at a Grand Tour to his name at the Vuelta a España a couple years ago. I think he was second in that race to Simon Yates, beating Angel Lopez. But since then, Emrick Mass really has disappointed me, to be honest. He hasn't quite pushed on and really has never really repeated that same form again. Even in the build-up to this Tour de France, wasn't really anywhere at the Dauphiné. Also, Movistar have Marc Soler included in their team. I think the plan was for him to lead the Giro d'Italia later in the year, which did make it quite surprising for me, seeing him on the start list of the Tour de France. I think he'll be in more of a domestique role. Again, we haven't seen much at all from Soler in the build-up to this Tour de France. So it could be a difficult year for Movistar, in my opinion. We know it is a transitional year for the team. I think they'll probably look for some more riders ahead of next season. It's going to be difficult for them though. Valverde aging, they really need Soler and Emrick Mass to push on, which really they haven't shown signs of at all as of late. Okay, so I'll talk about Cofidis next up, and we have Gillum Martin, third place at the Dauphiné recently. I think his best result probably in the overall GC at World Tour level. Gillum Martin, to this point, he's still in his mid-20s. He has never really gone for the GC. In most races he's entered, he's always kind of been that breakaway type, one of the strongest climbers in the breakaway. I'd really like to see him go for the GC. I don't really see him winning the Tour de France, but he could certainly put together a top 10, maybe even a top 5 performance, certainly judging by his Dauphiné form. Can he do that over 3 weeks? Yet to be seen, but I'd love to see him try, that's for sure. And Cofidis do have some other very strong breakaway climbers. We have Jesus Herrada. And guys, if you saw or if you didn't see the Spanish National Road Race Championship that Sanchez won, I mentioned it earlier, but heartbreaking for Herrada because it was a battle between Herrada and Sanchez, and with about 200 meters left, if that, Herrada, I think he got stuck in one gear. So he climbed off his bike and walked to the finish as the rest of the guys passed him. And he was furious, obviously, with that. I think Sanchez would have won anyway, but hopefully Herrada can get some kind of redemption at this year's race with a stage win at the Tour after being so unlucky in the Spanish road race. We also have Nicolas Aday. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he did lead the Vuelta for a few stages last year in the red jersey earlier in the race. Those two guys, will definitely see them very present in the breakaways. And of course, to this point, I'm yet to mention Cofidis' big signing from this off-season. Elia Viviani comes to the race. Certainly hasn't shown the form we're so used to him seeing in previous years, where he couldn't stop winning at De Koning Quick-Step. I think we all expected him to take a step down after leaving Quick-Step. Perhaps he's been still a slight disappointment at Cofidis. He'll be looking for stage wins, perhaps one stage win, and Cofidis will be delighted because it's been a little while since they won a stage at the Tour de France. And correct me if I'm wrong, I've just looked it up actually. It seems the last time Cofidis did win a stage at the Tour was 2008. So 12 years since they last won a stage. This year, I think they've got a great chance. Herrada, Viviani, Gila Martin as well. Between the three of those, I think they can expect a stage win. I'd love to see it at least. Okay, so next up, I'll talk about CCC. And it seems we won't have CCC in the peloton next year, at the time of recording this at least. But we do have Matteo Trentin. We have Greg Van Avermaet, who has been the yellow jersey multiple times in his career. Of course, these guys, very, very capable sprinters. Can they win from the big bunch sprints? Don't think so. But they could certainly try for the green jersey, particularly Trentin. He's a bit quicker than Greg Van Avermaet at this stage in their careers, I would suggest. They both can get over some of the bigger climbs that the likes of Ewan and Bennett will struggle with. So if they really went for it, I can see Trentin certainly challenging for that green jersey. Two more riders, again, I've mentioned it. Stage 2 is going to be intriguing because the Col de Torini, the Col Mian as well. How quick is the tempo going to be? If we see Roglic or Bookman or another of the big contenders struggling, we will surely see a crazy fast tempo and only see really the elite climbers head towards Nice in the front group. But if we see a slightly slower tempo, Van Avermaet or Trentin could be one of the favourites for that stage. And CCC again, really without a genuine GC contender in my opinion. We have Ilnur Zakarin, really hasn't progressed from a few years ago. If anything, he's probably taken a step back in his performances. I know he did well at a stage on the Giro last year. That's probably the best he can hope for a stage win at this year's Tour de France. Can't really see him going for the GC. We have Simon Geschke, who's ridden well, Demarchi, Jan Hurt. So we do have some strong riders here, all probably looking for stage wins. All right, guys, we're now going to move on to the final World Tour team, Israel Startup Nation. We have Dan Martin leading the team. We have Greipel as well. Can he maybe roll the years back and grab a stage or two? Can't really see it happening, to be honest. Same with Dan Martin. He struggled for fitness I think he picked up an injury at the Dauphiné, so I can't really see Gila Martin being in top form anymore. Ben Hermans, perhaps we could see him challenge for a stage in the break. Again, probably the best we'll see of him. Niels Pollitt, I think moving on to Bora Hansgrohe at the end of this season. A Flandrian, definitely will be going in the breaks, I expect. Israel Startup Nation, all of us are really looking to next season when Chris Froome, Mike Woods and the rest will all be joining their ranks. If only Chris Froome could have joined one season early, that would have been absolutely intriguing. So finally guys, I'm going to round this out with Team Total Direct Energy and B&B Vital Concept 2 Conti Pro teams. We have the likes of Kalmajan, who's won a stage at the Tour previously for Total. He's moving on to AG2R next season, so this will be his last Tour de France with his current team. We have Bonifacio, could maybe get some top 5s in the sprints, top 3s maybe. Can't really see him beating Caleb Ewan or Sam Bennett though, if I'm honest. But yeah, those guys will be going for stage wins. They're really the two leaders in that squad. Moving on to B&B Vital Concept, we have Pierre Rolland, who no one really saw this coming. Pierre Rolland, out of nowhere, he struggled for a few years now after showing a lot of promise and getting a top 10 a couple times, I think, in the Tour de France earlier in his career. But Pierre Rolland really did show some improved form at the Dauphiné, staying with some of the real GC favourites for the majority of the race. He looked really, really good, and he looked to attack as well. A lot of those were shut down pretty quickly, but good to see Rolland's looking back to his best. Maybe he can challenge for the KOM. Maybe he can challenge for a stage or two. Surely he won't go for the GC. Would be fantastic to see, but I think a realistic goal for Rolland and B&B Vital Concept probably is to go for a stage win or the KOM jersey. Apart from that, they do have Brian Coquard, who has shown some decent form. He did come second at the French Nationals behind Demar, but really was outclassed by Demar, who has shown brilliant form recently, granted, but he was outclassed by Demar, despite Demar being the only man chasing Julian Alaphilippe at the roads. Coquard just sat on Demar's wheel at that race, didn't help out at all, and still got comprehensively beaten by Demar in that sprint. So Coquard probably will be going for top 5s on stages. Can't really see him getting a stage win. Would be good to see Bonifacio or Coquard challenge for the stages in the sprints, but I really think they are a level below Caleb Ewan and Sam Bennett. Okay then guys, I think we have covered every team ahead of this year's Tour de France. Hopefully you're not completely sick of my voice just yet, because I do want to kind of give some quick predictions and discuss the top favourites that I think could win each jersey at the race. So we'll start with the yellow jersey, of course. And I have no doubt in my mind and it's a big if here, if Primož Roglič is in the same form he has shown pre-Tour de France at the early stages of the Criterium to Dauphiné, he will win the race. Is he bluffing about his injury to perhaps take the pressure off? I'm not sure at this stage. It's the same question though with so many riders, Emmanuel Buchmann, Nairaman, even Mikel Landa to some extent. Are they in the required fitness to win the Tour? So with my prediction, I'm going to go with someone that has never shown it over 3 weeks. Quite the risk, you could say, so I could eat my words here, but I will predict Thibaut Pinot is going to bring it home for France and win the Tour. I think the squad around him, whilst not quite on the level of, granted, Jumbo-Visma and the Ineos Grenadiers, it's a very strong team. The likes of Madouas, the likes of Reichenbach, Gaudu if he's on form, Stefan Kung, so important. These guys really are capable climbers. And if they can support Pinot in the high mountains, in the hillier, more difficult stages, that'd be a massive, massive assistance, because Pinot really does need that support, I feel. However, if not Pinot, I will say watch out for Emmanuel Buchmann, because if he can overcome his injury, he can definitely drag himself onto the podium. That is for sure. Really, really rate Emmanuel Buchmann. One more prediction I'll say in the GC is that Pavel Sivakov will finish ahead of Egan Bernal and Richard Carapaz and be the best place Ineos rider. I will probably look back on that in a couple of weeks and look like an absolute fool. But Pavel has shown some fantastic form in the build up to the tour and really comes in really flying compared to many other contenders. Okay, so looking quickly at the green jersey, I will predict that Peter Sagan will miss out on that green jersey this year. He didn't quite show the form we're used to last year. He didn't early this year either. Sadly, I think Sagan could be somewhat on the decline already. He certainly cannot climb like he used to, that is for sure. So I'm going to say Giacomo Nitsolo is going to win the green jersey for Team NTT at this year's Tour de France. He beat Arnaud Démare recently. He won the Italian road race ahead of fellow countryman Davide Ballerini. He's a very, very good sprinter in the form of his life. I really, really back him to 1, win the first Grand Tour stage of his career, and also win the green jersey. Looking quickly then at the Polkadot Jersey, really this competition could go to anyone, so I have no idea who's going to win this, but I would say Sergio Higuita of EF Pro Cycling really is a great sprinter, as I've already mentioned. Don't see him being their GC leader with Iran and Martinez on the team. I see him being given a free role to go up the roads in the breakaways. Very, very good attacking rider with some good acceleration, good sprint on him as well. So I will back Higuita to win the KOM jersey. Other contenders though could be Adam Yates, maybe even Bardet, because they've already said they're not going for GC, so they will probably be up the roads very regularly, going for stage wins as well. All right then guys, I think that will round out this opening podcast. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed making it. It's probably gone on a little long for my liking. In the future, most podcasts will be quite a bit shorter than this, hopefully a bit snappier as well, hopefully less waffling from me. I will improve hopefully over time, so definitely give me some feedback because I'd love to hear your thoughts and improve on the podcast in the future. And over the next couple of weeks, I am planning on doing daily pods where we will analyse certain sections of the Tour de France, specific talking points from the day's stage, and of course look ahead to the stage coming up the next day. So hopefully you guys are ready for that, and hopefully this will be a really enjoyable couple of weeks at the Tour de France. You can find me over on YouTube and Twitter at Timmsoski on both TIMMSOSKI if you're interested, of course. Hope you enjoyed it again, guys. Leave a good review if you did. I will see you guys in the next one.